I never thought a broken saddle latch would lead to my own son raising a belt against me. Lucas knocked on my bedroom door just after sunrise. Said something was off in the tack room. Latch snapped. Could I come take a look? He said it soft, too soft, like he was tucking something sharp under the words. I followed him out past the frost-glazed porch steps, my apron still on, coffee still steeping back in the kitchen. The air was dry, brittle. Nevada mornings in March always carried that bite. He didn't speak as we walked, just kept a half step ahead, boots scuffing gravel like he didn't want to be doing this. I told myself I was imagining it, that this was nothing, but when I stepped into the tack room first, I felt it. That change. That tightening in the air like the storm had already arrived and I'd somehow missed the first clap. The door closed behind me, clicked, and there she was, Brianna. She didn't say a word, just stood in the corner, hands buried in her coat pockets like she was bracing for wind. Then the belt cracked. It caught my ribs before I even had time to twist. The pain was sudden, blinding. I gasped and staggered back, reaching for the bench behind me. But Lucas grabbed my wrist, shoved me down. His grip wasn't angry. That's what chilled me most. It was firm, mechanical, like he'd planned it. 3, maybe 4 lashes. Enough to sear, to bruise, to scare. Brianna leaned over, her breath steady, and hissed, "We don't want to hurt you again, but we will." I remember the sound of the old feed cabinet groaning behind me. Victor had carved a scratch into the wood by accident once, shaped like a crooked T. I locked my eyes on it. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't give them that. Then, silence. They stepped back. Brianna slid a manila folder beside me like it was a church bulletin. "Just sign it, Mama," she said. "It's cleaner this way." I said nothing, just stared at the scratch. And they left. The door stayed open behind them. But I didn't move. My ribs burned. My heart thudded like it couldn't catch up. My whole life had happened in that room. Oiling saddles, tying halters, showing Lucas how to braid reins. And now, it didn't feel like mine. Eventually, I rose. I didn't take the folder. I didn't even touch it. I walked back to the house holding my side, a gust of wind chasing me the whole way. In the kitchen, the clock blinked 7:12. The coffee had gone cold. My hands trembled as I poured it anyway, drank it like medicine. They were upstairs now, probably talking about how it went, whether I'd tell, whether I'd sign. They didn't know that my name was still on every acre, that the original deed sat behind the spice tins above the stove, wrapped in oilcloth, that I wasn't going down quiet. But in that moment, bruised, breathless, I didn't feel like a warrior. I felt like a ghost in my own home. And somewhere, in the quiet hum of that old house, I swear I could still hear Victor. "If our own turn," he once told me after his first stroke, "don't give them the land. Let the land outlive them." I didn't know what that meant then. Now I did. The next morning, they acted like they hadn't laid a hand on me. Lucas was at the stove, frying eggs like it was any old Tuesday, whistling some country tune I didn't recognize. Brianna poured coffee with one hand, checking her phone with the other. I walked in slow, each step stiff from bruises blooming under my clothes. I kept one hand braced against the wall just to stay upright. My ribs ached every time I breathed, but I didn't wince. I wouldn't give them that. "Morning," Brianna said, like she hadn't watched me curled up on the tack room floor. "Want toast?" I sat down at the far end of the table, the spot Victor used to call Command Central. I'd held 1,000 Sunday dinners there, cut birthday cakes, signed tax checks, read letters from relatives long past. Now I gripped the edge of it, just to keep from shaking. Lucas set a plate in front of me like I was a guest. 2 eggs, overdone, burnt toast, black coffee. He smiled. "Need anything else, Ma?" I didn't speak. I couldn't. If I opened my mouth, I might scream, and once I started, I didn't know if I'd stop. They sat down like we were some happy family. Lucas even laughed, full, throaty, like he didn't have guilt in his veins, like his belt hadn't left welts across my back just hours ago. And then he said it. "We were talking last night. Thought maybe we'd get a financial planner out here, help clean up some things before winter." I looked at him. Really looked. He wasn't asking. He was laying groundwork. The takeover wasn't paused. It had just changed tone, like the tack room never happened. I glanced at the envelope sitting neatly on the sideboard. The same papers. They hadn't even bothered to hide them. But here's the thing they didn't know. They thought I was stupid. Slow. Maybe because I used paper checks and still wrote birthday cards in cursive. Maybe because I didn't speak up when they rearranged my cabinets or turned off my porch light without asking. But I remembered something Victor told me years ago, after a land dispute with a neighbor. "Never tell people what you know, Maggie. Just let them think you're deaf until it's time to speak." I stirred my coffee, eyes on the window. Out there, the barn looked the same, the pasture still golden in the early light. But inside me, something had shifted. A quiet, rooted defiance. They didn't know the deed was still in my name. They didn't know about the clause Victor added when he had his first health scare, protecting the land from forced transfer without a formal court review. They didn't know I'd helped draft it, that I still had a copy. I took a small bite of burnt toast, swallowed it like gravel. My fingers trembled against the mug, but I wrapped them tight until the shaking stopped. Let them think I was weak. Let them think I'd forget. But I knew one thing they didn't. Bruises heal. Deeds don't lie. And I wasn't about to hand over the only thing Victor left me, just because my children thought they could break me. I would not sign. Not now. Not ever. After the silent breakfast, I slipped into the hallway. My hands still smelled faintly of egg yolk and antiseptic cream. I dabbed it under my shirt when no one was looking, on the welt near my left rib, the one that made it hard to breathe when I bent. I stood in front of the photo wall. Lucas with his first lamb, about 6 years old, gap-toothed and proud, holding the rope like a parade ribbon. Brianna brushing her pony in that ridiculous pink jacket she begged for every Christmas until Victor finally caved. And right in the middle, me and Victor. Wedding day. I had a daisy crown on. He wore those awful plaid suspenders. We were both sunburned and smiling. I touched the glass of that photo with my knuckle, not too hard, just enough to feel it. I whispered, "You wouldn't believe what they've done." But even as I said it, I knew he would believe it. Victor always said, "Land turns people. Just wait till we're both gone, Maggie. They'll love the property more than they ever loved the porch swings or the Christmas pie." Back then, I told him he was being cynical, said our children weren't like that. God forgive me, I was wrong. I walked farther down the hall, into the den, where our old ledger book still sat in the roll-top desk. I'd kept every feed invoice, every fencing bill, all of it handwritten in ballpoint. Pages curled from time. I ran my finger down a column where Victor had marked, "Hey, paid in full, never owe a man twice." He wasn't just talking about hay. We built this place. Every fence post, every damn shingle. I helped lay concrete when the original barn flooded in '86. I cleaned horse stalls pregnant with Brianna. I skipped my mother's funeral because the irrigation had failed. And now I was supposed to just sign? To smile while they erased everything Victor and I fought for? I closed the ledger. I felt calm. But not the kind that means peace. The kind that comes right before a storm breaks, when the birds go silent and the sky goes the color of wet ash. They wanted to erase me, but they'd underestimated who I used to be before I was mom, before I was the one who packed lunches and stayed quiet at the dinner table so everyone else could speak. I was the girl who rode a draft horse bareback through hail when we lost power in '74. The woman who outbid 3 men for this property line because the land survey was off by 2 inches, and I caught it. The wife who stood beside Victor while cancer took him slow and ugly, and I never once asked, why us? They forgot who raised them. So I started planning. Not loud, not obvious, just small things, quiet things. I'd been invisible in this house so long they wouldn't see me coming, and they sure as hell wouldn't know what hit them. They arrived like company, not children, not kin, company. Lucas parked the SUV like he owned the gravel it rolled across, stepped out in clean boots. I noticed that first, his boots weren't muddy. He hadn't touched a stall, not in years. Brianna climbed out second. Neat hair, briefcase instead of her old canvas tote. Not even a smile, just business. I stood on the porch and watched, didn't wave, didn't call out, just watched. Inside they moved like guests, wiped their feet, looked around like they were surveying damage, not memories. Lucas gave the kitchen table a soft pat, like testing its sturdiness. Then sat. Brianna unclasped her case. Click, click, like a lawyer, like a realtor, like a stranger. She pulled out a neat stack of folders, deeds, valuation charts, land surveys. She laid them out like placemats. No hugs, no mention of Victor, not even a, "How have you been, Mama?" Just numbers. I stayed near the stove, hands braced on the sink edge. My ribs still screamed when I breathed too deep, but I didn't flinch. The roast in the oven had gone cold, just like the room. Lucas cleared his throat first. "Mom, you know we love this place, but you can't manage it alone anymore." That word again. Can't. He said taxes were rising, that the fences were falling, that the roof leaked, that it was irresponsible, unfair, for me to carry the burden. I didn't respond, just watched his jaw move like a salesman in Sunday clothes. Brianna jumped in next, softer voice. That fake sweet syrup she used to use when she wanted something. "It's not about cutting you out," she said, sliding the first paper toward me. "You'd still live here, just like always. Nothing would change, except on paper." I didn't look down, didn't need to, because what changes on paper always changes the rest. I asked one question, "Who's buying?" Lucas hesitated, then muttered, "A group out of Reno. Green energy, wind, maybe solar. They'll preserve the landscape. It's ethical." Ethical. I nearly laughed. I asked another question, "How much?" That he answered too fast. "More than the land's ever been worth. We can use it to fix up the place. Maybe even hire help for you." I kept my face still, but inside, something started to tighten. Pull up. Stand. I wasn't just being pushed. I was being written out, and they thought I wouldn't notice. Brianna pulled out a final folder, this one thicker, more formal. Legalese, thicker than molasses. Said the process would be simple if I cooperated. That word, cooperated. I wiped my hands on my apron and said, "I need time." I didn't say yes, I didn't say no, just asked for time. Lucas's jaw twitched, just for a second. Brianna closed the folder without a word, said they'd check the barn. Let me think. And they left the kitchen like nothing had just happened, like they hadn't come in here with smiles and daggers. When the door closed, I exhaled. The roast smelled like rosemary and something else. Pressure. And I knew, clear as a newborn sky, they didn't come to help. They came to take. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I moved from chair to chair, room to room, like the house itself had been rearranged. It hadn't, but something in it felt shifted, off, like the walls had started leaning in. At 3:12 a.m., I made a list. Not names, not revenge, just facts. Where the deed was. Where Victor's old ledgers were. Which cabinets they'd rifled through when they thought I wasn't looking. I had no war chest, no lawyer on speed dial, no children left to trust. But I had Edith. Edith Greaves, who once worked 30 years at the county recorder's office. The same woman who helped Victor and me sort that nasty zoning error in '06 when the irrigation line cut through the county's new parcel boundary. She didn't blink once, just brought coffee and fixed it before the weekend. So I called her. She picked up on the second ring. Her voice sounded like gravel and honey. Tired but steady. "Margaret Hale," she said. "Haven't heard your name in a while." "I need to talk," I said. "It's about the land." She didn't ask questions, just said, "I'll bring lemon muffins." An hour later, she pulled up in her little rust-orange Toyota, wearing gardening gloves she forgot to take off. Her smile was crooked like always. But her eyes were sharp. We didn't sit in the kitchen. Too many ears in the house, and I didn't trust walls that had heard what mine had. I led her out to the hay shed. It was cooler out there. Quiet in that thick way barns get when the air doesn't move. The kind of quiet where you can hear your own thinking. I poured her coffee from a thermos and told her everything, not all at once. I didn't have the breath for that, but the bruises, the folder, the threats, the word guardianship. Edith didn't flinch. She just sipped her coffee and nodded like she'd heard worse, and probably had. "They always come for the land first," she muttered, wiping crumbs off her knee, "especially when they know it's the only thing left that still belongs to you." She opened her purse and pulled out a small notepad, jotted down a name, May Campbell. "Used to work Bureau of Land Management," she said. "Now she does private consulting. Knows everything about land protection, conservation easements, family disputes. She's tough. She's quiet. And she doesn't get rattled." I took the paper, folded it twice, and slid it into the inside pocket of my cardigan, the one with Victor's initials still stitched faint in the lining. We sat a little longer. Didn't talk about what had happened, just watched dust float through the slats of sunlight. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like the beginning. When I walked Edith back to her car, Lucas was standing near the truck, watching. He squinted at her. She didn't wave, just tipped her head. He nodded back, wary. Good. He should be, because I wasn't just the woman with cold coffee and bruised ribs anymore. I was the woman gathering wind. That night, after they'd gone to bed, or pretended to, I moved like I used to in winter storms. Quiet, careful, certain. I put the kettle on, not because I needed tea, but because the sound of boiling water made the silence feel less hollow. Then I lit the oil lamp we kept under the sink. The electricity hummed too loud now. I didn't want them hearing a single thing. I pulled on Victor's old barn coat, the one with the frayed sleeves and the broken zipper he never got around to fixing. It still smelled like cedar and hay and a man who did things the hard way because it meant they'd last. Then I walked to the root cellar, opened it slow. The hinges groaned, soft and sharp. I hadn't been down there since the summer after Victor passed. Too many memories sealed in glass jars and dust. But tonight it felt different, necessary. I stepped down into the dark, one hand brushing along the brick wall to guide me. And then I began. Not everything at once, just what mattered. I pulled the old black tub from behind the potato crates, wiped the top clean with my sleeve. Inside, I started placing pieces of my life, the original deed, wrapped in oilcloth, still signed in Victor's old pen. The ledger where we'd logged every fence built, every acre paid down in sweat and savings. A copy of our will draft, never finalized, but still notarized, marked with Victor's initials and mine, our wedding photo in its cracked frame. I didn't need it to fight, but I needed it near. And last, tucked in an old flour sack, the thing I hadn't touched in 5 years, a small leather pouch holding our silver anniversary coin, just a token. But it reminded me I had lived a life full of earned things, not inherited, not stolen, earned. When I finished, I sealed the tub, pressed the lid until it clicked. Then I stacked 2 crates of canned tomatoes on top of it. Nobody in this house cared for tomatoes anymore. I stood there a while longer, let the quiet wrap around me. Upstairs, I could hear them moving. Lucas's boots across the hallway floor, Brianna's voice. Low, too low, probably on the phone again, probably arranging things behind my back. Let them. Because while they were planning my replacement, I was preserving the truth. Every woman I know has a place she stores her real things. Not jewelry, not valuables. Truth. Mine was now behind potatoes. By the time I returned to the kitchen, the kettle had gone cold. I didn't bother reheating it. I sat down at the table and opened my small notepad, wrote one word, leverage. Then I underlined it. Because I didn't have a lawyer yet. I didn't have the language for what they were doing. But I knew what I wouldn't do. I wouldn't disappear. I wouldn't bend. And I damn sure wouldn't sign anything until I had something of my own tucked deep enough no storm could reach it. They thought I was old, tired, alone. But they forgot what I learned in storms. You don't shout into the wind. You anchor down and wait. The next morning, I stopped cooking. No speech, no dramatics. I just didn't set the table, didn't crack eggs, didn't heat the pan. I sat at the counter with a piece of dry toast and a mug of tea and let them feel it. Lucas came downstairs first, his hair still wet, shirt wrinkled like he'd slept in it. He opened the fridge, closed it, looked at me like I'd forgotten something. I didn't. Brianna followed, typing one-handed on her phone. She didn't even glance up, just said, "We'll grab something in town." That was the first win. Tiny, silent, mine. Later that day, I found my pantry rearranged, cans shuffled into categories I never used, my good preserves shoved to the back, spices I loved replaced with powders I didn't recognize, turmeric protein blend, low sodium salt, detox broth mix. Brianna called it streamlining. I didn't say a word. Just moved my flour jar back to its spot and made a note. They've stopped asking permission. Lucas took my truck without a word, left me with the mule cart and a half-dead battery. I walked the fence line that day instead of driving. My knees screamed, but I did it anyway. When I returned, the truck was parked crooked, the feed sacks still in the bed, half ripped open. I didn't touch them. Let the sun bleach the top layer. Let the waste show. Because the more they acted like this place was already theirs, the more obvious it became. They didn't know how to run it. And I wanted them to feel that. They stopped calling me mama. They stopped saying my name. It was always she, her, or worst of all, silence. At night, they whispered behind doors. I could hear the cadence of planning, not arguing. I didn't need to catch the words. The tone told me enough. They weren't waiting for me to sign anymore. They were preparing to move forward without me, but what they didn't understand was I had already moved first. While they drafted emails and talked to men named Leo or Marcus, I kept watching, listening, cataloging. I found Brianna's spreadsheet open one night, labeled Conversion Timeline. I didn't touch a thing, but I saw it. April, South Pasture May, Mule Pen June, Barn, Main House. It wasn't just land, it was my life, cut into rows and boxes like a grocery list. They had already divided me up on paper, and yet there I was, whole, breathing, drinking lukewarm tea by the sink while they plotted how to erase me from my own name. That night, I walked to the barn, flashlight in hand. The belt they used on me, I found it, rolled tight, tucked behind the grain bin. I didn't burn it, didn't hide it. I wrapped it in plastic, stuffed it behind the haystack, and left it there. Not because I needed revenge, because I needed to remember. Every woman who's ever been pushed out of her own life knows you don't always get justice in the moment. Sometimes you just hold the receipt. They came to me late, after dark. I was in the kitchen, wiping down the counter out of habit, not need. I'd already cleaned it twice, but something in me needed to keep my hands moving. The room smelled like old toast and lavender cleaner, the kind of scent you associate with hospitals and endings. Lucas stood in the doorway, arms crossed. Brianna behind him, folder in hand. I knew the folder. Black, slim, different from the first one. Cleaner, final. Lucas cleared his throat like he thought this was a negotiation. "We've talked to a lawyer," he said, casual. "A good one. She says there are options." Brianna stepped forward and placed the folder on the counter between us. Her nails tapped once against the cover. Measured, deliberate. She smiled, soft, too soft, and said, "If you won't sign voluntarily, we may have to file for guardianship." There it was, the line. No more pretending. No more manipulation through politeness. Just take it from her. They said I was refusing care. Said I'd shown signs of confusion. That I forgot things. That I left the oven on last week. That I let the fences go. That it was all getting too much for me. And it wasn't personal, they said. Just legal protection for everyone. I stared at the folder like it was a weapon. Because it was. "You think I'm incompetent," I said. Not a question. Just the truth. set on the table like a centerpiece. Brianna didn't answer. She just nodded once, like she was doing me a kindness. Lucas looked down, like maybe part of him still knew shame, but not enough to stop. I didn't speak again, didn't argue, didn't defend. What would I say? That my ribs still ached when I turned? That my name was still on the deed they hadn't found? That I knew the law better than they did, thanks to Victor's obsessive file cabinets? No, I said nothing, because they wanted a reaction, and I wasn't giving it to them. Instead, I wiped my hands dry with a towel, folded it slowly, neatly, set it beside the sink like we were closing a normal night. Then I walked past them, straight to my bedroom. I could feel their eyes on my back, trying to measure how much of me was left to break. But here's what they didn't see. They were counting bruises. I was counting witnesses. I had already spoken to Edith, already written down every word of that night in the tack room, already taken photos of the purple blooming across my ribs. They thought they were filing proof. I already had it. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in Victor's old flannel chair, shotgun propped beside the firewood, and listened to them talk behind their door. Whispers. Strategy. But I didn't need to hear the words, because I'd already decided. If they wanted to take this land through lies, I'd bury them with the truth. The next morning, I sat on the porch with my tea and watched the light change. That soft gold that only shows up in early spring, where the frost hasn't decided whether it's leaving or not. That's when Victor used to say anything can still grow if the root's not dead. I wasn't dead, and neither was my fight. I reached into my apron pocket and pulled out the muffin box Edith had handed me 2 days before, scribbled on the back in blue ink, barely legible. May Campbell, private land consultant, number county, knows what she's doing. I dialed it from the old rotary phone on the hallway wall, the one Brianna rolled her eyes at, saying it was antique clutter. It rang once, twice. May Campbell speaking. Her voice was calm, direct, a woman who didn't bother with small talk unless it mattered. I told her who I was, where I lived, why I was calling. I didn't cry. I didn't ask for sympathy. I just told her I needed someone who understood land, family coercion, and what it meant to protect something when the danger came with your last name. She listened. No interruptions, no shocked gasps. Then she said, "I can be there tomorrow afternoon." That was it. No forms, no retainer. Just a promise made in a voice that sounded like roots cracking concrete. I hung up, turned slowly, and looked through the screen door. Lucas was in the barn, pretending to fix something. Brianna sat at the kitchen island with her laptop, probably typing out the next stage of their little operation. They had no idea that the ground beneath them had just started to shift. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. But I went back to the filing cabinet in the mudroom and pulled out a new folder. Inside, my handwritten timeline of events printed photos of the bruises, a copy of the zoning map Victor and I had updated in '98, a second envelope labeled "In Case Public." I added May's name to the cover, underlined it. That night, I played polite. I stirred beans on the stove like I always did on Fridays. Lucas walked in and said it smelled like childhood. I said nothing. Brianna set the table for 3, napkins folded, glasses poured. I watched her hands move like she was setting a stage. When we sat down, she leaned forward and said, "We're moving up the timeline." I raised one eyebrow. She said, "We need you to sign by the end of the week. It's best for everyone." I wiped my hands on the dish towel, turned off the burner, let the silence stretch between us like wire pulled tight. "I'll think about it," I said. But I already had. Because I wasn't stalling anymore, I was preparing. They were still treating me like a broken gate to be pushed open. But tomorrow, when May stepped through that door, they'd realize I was the lock, and I'd just found the key. Sunday afternoon came dressed like Christmas. I woke to the smell of roast beef and rosemary, Victor's old recipe, the one he made only on holidays or hard days. The smell used to mean comfort. Now it meant something was being prepared, and it wasn't just the meal. The table was set with the good plates, candles lit, napkins folded into those little fans Brianna used to love. Lucas even brought out the wine, a bottle they'd stashed in the pantry, untouched since Victor's wake. I stood in the doorway for a long time before stepping in. It looked like a memory, but it felt like a trap. Lucas smiled. Too big, too clean. Thought we'd all eat together. Like old times. Old times didn't come with folders beside the silverware. I took my seat without a word. My hands stayed folded in my lap. The candlelight flickered in Brianna's earrings. She looked like someone playing a role she didn't believe in anymore. They made small talk. Lucas mentioned the weather. Brianna brought up the horses needing their hooves checked. Nobody said anything that meant a thing. And then, silence. That hum that builds under fake conversation, waiting to drop its mask. Brianna reached into her cardigan, pulled out a new folder, slimmer than the last. Neat, smooth. She set it beside my plate like a menu. "This is the updated version," she said softly. "We've simplified things. Just a partial transfer to start." Lucas added, "The buyer's ready, a man from Nevada. He's interested in the southern tract. If we move quick, it'll take pressure off you. You can rest. You've done your part. You can rest." That line landed harder than any bruise. They weren't asking anymore. They were burying me politely. I looked at the folder. Didn't touch it. Didn't need to. Because here's the thing. No one tells you about power. It doesn't always look like yelling. Sometimes it looks like standing up quietly while others are still mid-sentence. I unfolded my napkin, set it gently on the table, pushed back my chair. Then I walked out. No words, no dramatic pause, just the sound of my steps on the hardwood and their forks hanging midair. I went to Victor's office, closed the door, locked it, sat at the desk and opened the drawer marked Miss Sound. Inside was the envelope I'd labeled "in case." I pulled it out, added something new, a photo I'd taken 2 nights earlier, the kitchen counter, folder open, Brianna's notes visible, buyer's name and number in plain view. Then I took out the old flip phone I kept in the desk. Still worked, battery low, but alive. Edna's number was still saved under E. I sent one word, "Ready?" Then I waited. 20 minutes passed. I returned to the dining room. The food was cold. The candles had burned halfway down. Lucas and Brianna were still sitting, still pretending this was normal. I looked at them both. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel small, didn't feel scared. I felt solid. "I've contacted someone about a conservation easement," I said. "I'm reviewing protections. Any sale without my signature will be challenged. And I have documentation. Legal, medical, photographic." Lucas stared. Brianna paled. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. Because now they knew. I wasn't just refusing to sign. I was about to strike back. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not from fear, not from anger, from knowing. Knowing something had finally shifted. That the house no longer hummed with their plans. It hummed with mine. So I walked down the hall, past the quiet kitchen, past the pantry they'd rearranged, and I'd already started taking back. Into Victor's office. The air in there still smelled like old paper and cedar oil. I hadn't touched much in here since he died. Couldn't. It had always felt too heavy. But now I needed what was inside. I opened the old safe behind the bookshelf. The combination hadn't changed. 18, 62, 7. Our wedding date in reverse. Inside, letters, insurance documents, a folded map of the land with Victor's handwritten notations in pencil, elevation lines, irrigation paths, all labeled like scripture, and one cassette tape, labeled in his handwriting, "For After." I sat at his desk, pulled the old player out from the drawer, plugged it into the wall, slipped the tape in with trembling fingers, and pressed play. His voice came through rough, quiet, worn by time and age, and that first stroke that never fully let go. "Margaret, if you're hearing this, something went wrong." I froze. He paused on the tape, cleared his throat. I could hear the faint whistle of his breathing, The way it sounded when he lay beside me in winter, chest rising like slow tides. "I've been thinking about the land," he said, "and the kids, and what they might become when we're gone." He chuckled, but there was no joy in it. "I hope I'm wrong. God, I hope I'm wrong." Then silence. Then, "If they ever try to split this place up, sell it off in pieces, if they ever try to force your hand, I need you to listen to me." I leaned in. "Make it public. Make noise. Don't protect them if they try to erase you. The land doesn't belong to whoever yells loudest. It belongs to whoever stays. And you've always stayed, Margaret." Another long pause. Then the words that cracked me open. "Sometimes shame is more powerful than any court order." Click. The tape ended. I didn't cry. I just sat there, his words still echoing like a storm rolling in from the canyon. I had been gathering documents, writing timelines, taking photos. But this was proof of intent. This was the man who built this life with me saying, "Don't let them win." So I stood. I pulled out every folder from the cabinet, made fresh copies. I laid out photos of my ribs, purple and yellow, and angry printouts of Brianna's spreadsheets with the conversion dates. The text message where Lucas said I was fading fast, sent accidentally to me instead of Marcus and Victor's voice, now digitized on a flash drive. Then I took out an old manila envelope, labeled it, "In case, legal," slid everything inside, and added one last thing, a handwritten letter from me. 1 page, just the truth, what they did, what they said, what I wouldn't let them take. I sealed it, marked it with today's date, and I slept that night, in Victor's chair, shotgun within reach. Not because I felt afraid, but because for the first time since they stepped back into this house, I felt protected. Not by law, not by force, by memory. And memory doesn't lie. She arrived at 2:14 p.m. silver sedan, dust trailing behind her like smoke. May Campbell stepped out wearing a gray coat and flat boots. No makeup, no briefcase, just a leather satchel, and eyes that didn't blink much. She walked to the porch like she'd lived here before. Lucas was already standing near the driveway, arms crossed. He took a step forward. May didn't stop walking. She said her name, quiet, firm, and handed him a sealed envelope before he could open his mouth. "Intent to investigate," she said. "Elder coercion, potential fraudulent transfer, an unauthorized guardianship threat." He blinked. She didn't. I opened the screen door and nodded her in. Behind her, Lucas stood frozen, envelope still dangling in his hand like a lit fuse. Brianna came down the stairs halfway through. She saw May in the living room, saw the documents fanned across the coffee table. Her face drained color like a faucet turned off mid-flow. I offered May a seat. She took it without hesitation. We didn't talk pleasantries. She opened her folder and began asking questions. Clear, clinical. Did I still manage finances? Yes. Did I receive medical care? Yes. Did I feel safe in my home? Pause. Then, I do now. She placed a document between us, a draft of the conservation easement. It wasn't finalized, but it was moving, a wall they hadn't seen coming. "You'll retain full stewardship," she said. "Once filed, no parcel can be sold, divided, or developed without your written approval, not even if they sue." She said it plainly, like reciting weather. Lucas re-entered the room. "This is manipulation," he said. "She doesn't understand what she's signing." May didn't even look at him. Instead, I reached across the table, and I pressed play, the flash drive. Victor's voice. The tape, now digital. His words rolled into the room like a slow wave. "If they ever tried to split the land, make it public." Silence. I didn't look at Lucas, didn't look at Brianna. I looked at May. She closed her folder. Then said, "Would you like me to initiate formal protection orders?" I nodded once. Steady, whole. "Yes," I said. "Let's begin." Brianna stood up and left the room. Lucas stared at the rug, fists clenched. But this wasn't his house anymore. not the way he thought it was. Because they had brought plans. I had brought evidence. After May left, I stayed seated for a while. The house was heavy with what had just happened. The walls felt wider somehow. Upstairs, drawers opened and shut. Boxes thumped. They were packing. I didn't go up. I didn't say goodbye. I went out to the porch and watched the sky fold into dusk. Soft, orange, still. I had protected everything I could. The land, the ledger, the woman they tried to erase. And now? Now I wasn't just someone trying to hold on. I was the one they had to answer to. They came down, just before noon. Lucas was still red from pacing. Brianna looked pale and sharp, like a wire pulled too tight. They didn't sit. They stood on opposite sides of the living room like children called into the principal's office. I was already there, in Victor's chair, arms folded across my chest, the recorder resting in my lap like a loaded weapon. "I have one more thing," I said. Neither of them moved. I pressed play. It wasn't long, just under 3 minutes, but it didn't have to be. The sound of the tack room echoed out into the room. The leather belt, slicing air. My quiet gasp. Brianna's voice. "Sign it, or next time won't be this easy." Lucas's voice. "She's making it harder than it has to be." Then, silence. I let it sit. I let it hurt. May, seated beside me, didn't say a word, just looked at them both. Calm, legal, unmoved. When the recording ended, she closed her notepad slowly. "As of this moment," she said, "I am legally obligated to advise that we file for protection under elder abuse statutes. This includes medical documentation, verbal threats, and audio evidence of physical coercion." Brianna stepped back like she'd been hit. Lucas shook his head once. "You're bluffing." "No," I said. "You did that. I just recorded it." They didn't respond. Because there was nothing left to say, May reached into her satchel and handed them each a sealed letter. "Formal notice of review has been initiated," she said. "Expect legal contact within 7 business days." Brianna's hands trembled. She didn't open it, just turned and walked upstairs without a sound. Lucas stood there, frozen. He looked at the recorder, at me, at the space between us, like he finally saw it wasn't his to cross. "I was just trying to help," he said. It wasn't even a lie. It was worse. It was a cop-out. I didn't answer, didn't nod, didn't rage. I just leaned back in Victor's chair and stared at the patch of sunlight falling across the floorboards, remembering the day we moved in. How we'd laughed laying rugs over uneven wood, said it gave the place character. This house still had character. What it didn't have anymore was them. By dusk, they were packed. Boxes, bags, perfume trails that didn't belong here. The smell of haste, the sound of silence. I stood on the porch as they loaded the last suitcase. Brianna didn't look up. Lucas shut the trunk too hard. He glanced back once, jaw set. But there was nothing in him to fight with anymore. I had taken the one thing they never thought I'd use. Proof. Not rage, not guilt, evidence. And with that, they were gone. The tires crunched the gravel for a long stretch, and then silence. But not the kind they left me with last time. This silence was clean. I walked room to room, windows open, air flowing. I picked up napkins they hadn't folded, dishes they never washed, and I didn't cry. I didn't even feel relief. I felt sovereign. The land was mine again, not because I won a fight, because I refused to be erased. They didn't slam the doors. They didn't yell, didn't plead, didn't say a single word. It would have been easier if they had. But no, they left like cowards, quiet ones, the kind that shut drawers a little too fast and avoid eye contact like it might burn. I stood on the porch as they loaded the last bag into the trunk. The wind had picked up. Dried grass whipped against the fence posts. The house creaked behind me, like it was settling or sighing. Brianna didn't look at me. Lucas did. He turned once, hand on the driver's door, and stared. His jaw was tight, that same tightness he used to get when he was 9 and caught in a lie. But there was no rage now, just something like regret, or maybe just defeat. And for the first time in my life, I didn't care which. I didn't wave, Didn't nod. I let the silence do what it needed to. They drove off just after sunset, gravel crunching, taillights blinking through the dust. Then nothing, just wind, porch wood groaning, and the sound of myself, still here. I didn't go back inside right away. I sat on the top step with Victor's old coat around my shoulders, shotgun resting against the railing like it had every right to be there. And I listened. Not for danger, for absence. It was finally quiet. No fake conversations, no folders on the table, no laughter without warmth. I didn't smile, but I felt something move in my chest, slow and low and earned. I walked back through the house, room by room. They hadn't left much behind. A pair of socks in the laundry room, a protein shake on the pantry shelf, a faint smear of lipstick on the bathroom mirror. I wiped it off with one stroke of the rag. I washed every dish, not because I had to, but because I wanted to reset the air. In the office, I opened the safe and placed the recorder beside the deed. Shut the door with a soft click. Not a bang, just closure. That night, I lit a fire in the hearth for the first time in months. The flames didn't roar, they whispered, low and warm and unbothered. I didn't pour wine. I didn't need anything fancy. I made tea, sat with my feet tucked under me in Victor's chair, the one that still held the shape of his body if you sat just right. I looked around. The house wasn't perfect. The floorboard still squeaked. The back window stuck. The faucet leaked when it felt like it. But it was mine. Not because the deed said so. Because I did. They came to take, but they left with nothing. And everything they couldn't carry stayed, not as memory, as testament. Because I didn't scream. I didn't fight dirty. I just refused to move. And that was enough.